The marble floors of Berlin's Grand Hotel carried conversations in a dozen languages that winter afternoon. But only one conversation carried the blueprint for murder. And only a 9-year-old boy sitting quietly in the lobby could understand it. Ethan Doyle had learned early that being invisible was a survival skill for poor kids in expensive places. His mother, Patricia, worked the diplomat reception across the hall, her Goodwill blazer and desperate smile barely masking 3 months of borrowed time in a city that cost more than Chicago ever had. They'd supposed to keep their heads down, clear their debts, and disappear back home. Then Ethan heard 2 men at the bar speaking German, smooth, casual German about aerosol compounds, cardiac arrest, and a general who would die before dessert. The briefcase sat on General Marcus Adler's table like a black promise, and Ethan's gift, the terrible, wonderful ability to understand any language after hearing just a few words, suddenly became the only thing standing between silence and massacre. Welcome to Life in Stories. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Your support means everything. Let's begin. The Berlin Grand Hotel had been designed to impress, and on this particular Tuesday in February, it succeeded magnificently. Flags from 14 nations hung in precise formation along the vaulted ceiling, their colors brilliant against cream-colored walls adorned with gold filigree. Camera flashes erupted in controlled bursts as delegates passed through the marble lobby, their movements choreographed by years of diplomatic theater. CNN, BBC, Deutsche Welle, the media presence alone suggested the significance of this week's security summit. Patricia Doyle moved through the controlled chaos with practiced efficiency, her headset crackling with constant updates. Austrian delegation needs the conference room reconfigured by 4. Dietary restrictions for the Polish attaché weren't noted. Someone find me a list. Where's the ambassador's security detail? Her burgundy blazer showed wrinkles from 14-hour days, but her voice remained steady, professional. This was the job that would change everything. 3 months coordinating events for foreign dignitaries, enough money to finally clear the medical debt that had followed them from Chicago like a shadow. Near the concierge desk, tucked into a leather armchair that dwarfed his small frame, 9-year-old Ethan Doyle worked colored pencils across his sketchpad with careful concentration. He'd learned to make himself invisible in spaces like this. Children were decoration, not participants in the world of international diplomacy. His drawing showed a soldier in dress uniform, the ribbons rendered in meticulous detail, even though he didn't know their meanings. He just liked how they looked, small rectangles of color that somehow conveyed entire stories. His world had always been one of silent observation. While other children demanded attention, Ethan collected details. The way security personnel touched their earpieces before moving, how translators' faces shifted microscopically when processing difficult phrases, which diplomats commanded space simply by entering it. Colors told him moods, gestures revealed intentions, and languages somehow unpacked themselves in his mind like gifts he'd never asked for. Patricia passed his chair for the 4th time that hour, squeezing his shoulder without breaking stride. "Doing okay, baby?" He nodded, not looking up, giving her the confirmation she needed to keep working. They were a team, the 2 of them. They'd always had to be. The afternoon light shifted through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric shadows across Persian rugs worth more than their entire year's rent. At the room's center, General Clinton Adler sat reviewing documents, his presence somehow both relaxed and vigilant. The black briefcase beside his chair bore diplomatic seals, and the kind of locks that suggested classified contents. Ethan was adding shadow beneath a metal when the sound caught his attention. Not the volume, but the texture. 2 men at the bar, suits expensive enough to blend seamlessly with the diplomatic crowd, stood with champagne flutes positioned like props. Their body language suggested casual conversation, Their words suggested something else entirely. The language was German. Ethan had heard maybe 20 minutes of German total in his 9 years. Hotel staff speaking to guests, a television program in their apartment's previous channel lineup. But his brain had already done what it always did: identified patterns, extracted meaning, constructed understanding from linguistic architecture. The mechanism activates when the latches release, the first man said, his accent carrying traces of somewhere east. Saxon, maybe, though Ethan didn't know those distinctions yet. Aerosolized compound disperses within 4 seconds. The second man's response came with a soft laugh that made something cold slide down Ethan's spine. Cardiac arrest presents as natural causes within 90 seconds. The general opens the case, the gas spreads before dessert, he'll be dead before the ambulance arrives. Ethan's pencil froze mid-stroke. His heart began hammering against his ribs with physical force. He looked at the briefcase, black, ordinary, lethal, then at the general's aide reaching toward it with routine familiarity. "Mom!" The word came out strangled, too quiet. Then louder. "M-O-M!" Patricia's head snapped up from across the lobby, her professional mask cracking into maternal concern. But Ethan wasn't waiting. His body moved before his mind caught up, the sketchpad clattering to marble as he bolted toward the general's table. "Don't open it!" His voice cracked through the diplomatic murmur like breaking glass. "Please, don't open the briefcase! It's poison! There's gas inside!" Time fractured into crystalline slow motion. Security personnel's hands moved toward holsters. Diplomats turned in synchronized surprise. Patricia lunged through the crowd, her headset swinging wild. The 2 men at the bar went rigid, champagne flutes suspended like frozen props. And General Clinton Adler, whose survival instincts had been honed in 3 war zones, locked eyes with the small boy sprinting toward him with tears streaming down his face, and raised one hand in a gesture that froze his aide's fingers centimeters from the briefcase latches. Ethan crashed against the table's edge, gasping, pointing with a shaking hand toward the bar. Those men, they were speaking German. They said when you open it, the gas comes out, and your heart stops and you'll die before anyone can save you. Secure those 2. Adler's voice cut through chaos with surgical precision, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. Lock down all exits. Nobody touches this case. The lobby erupted. Security converged on the bar where both suspects broke into practiced flight. Radios crackled in 4 languages. Patricia reached Ethan, pulling him against her with trembling hands, her mind struggling to process the impossible unfolding around them. Within 2 minutes, both men lay face down on marble, zip-tied and silent. Within 6 minutes, the bomb disposal unit arrived in tactical gear that turned the elegant lobby into a war zone. The briefcase sat untouched, a black monument to what almost happened. Patricia watched through tears as technicians examined the case with instruments she couldn't name. Ethan pressed against her, his bravado dissolved into shaking aftermath. General Adler stood motionless, his jaw set in granite. When the senior technician looked up, his face beneath the visor had gone pale. Sophisticated aerosolized toxin. Latch-activated dispersal mechanism, fatal exposure radius of 4 meters. The general's eyes found Ethan again, found the small boy who'd somehow known, who'd somehow understood, who'd saved not just 1 life, but dozens. He approached slowly, lowering himself to 1 knee. "You understood what they said?" Not a question. A statement weighted with implications. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Adler looked up at Patricia, and what she saw in his battle-hardened face wasn't suspicion. It was recognition and protection. "Ma'am, I'm placing you both under security detail. This building is locked down until I understand exactly why your son knew what was in that case." He stood, his presence expanding into something that felt like a shield. And until I'm certain the people who planned this don't know he heard them. Patricia's whisper barely carried. Are we in danger? The general's response was immediate, absolute. Not while I'm breathing. The interrogation room wasn't designed for comfort. Fluorescent lights hummed against white walls, casting Patricia and Ethan in the kind of sterile brightness that made everything feel exposed. 3 intelligence officials sat across the metal table, German BND, American CIA, and someone from Interpol whose credentials Patricia hadn't fully processed. They'd been asking the same questions in different configurations for 90 minutes. Mrs. Doyle, I need you to understand the gravity of what we're suggesting. The BND officer, a woman named Schneider with steel-rimmed glasses, leaned forward with barely concealed skepticism. Your son identified a sophisticated assassination plot by overhearing a conversation in a language he claims to have never formally studied. You understand how that sounds? Patricia's hands clenched beneath the table. I understand that my son saved lives today. I understand that instead of thanking him, you're treating us like suspects. The CIA officer, Reynolds, mid-50s, with the exhausted eyes of someone who'd seen too many lies, shifted his attention to Ethan. Son, I want you to tell me again, in your own words, how you knew what those men were saying. Ethan sat very still, his small frame rigid with the kind of tension that came from being simultaneously terrified and desperate to be believed. His voice emerged small but steady. I just hear things, and they make sense. The words arrange themselves in my head, like a puzzle that solves itself. You've never taken German classes? Never used language apps? Never... He's 9 years old, Patricia interrupted, her voice cracking. He watches cartoons and draws pictures and worries about math homework. He doesn't use language apps. He just knows. Schneider exchanged glances with Reynolds. The Interpol officer made notes with mechanical precision, his pen scratching against paper like an accusation. Ma'am, children don't spontaneously acquire linguistic comprehension without exposure or instruction. The human brain doesn't work that way. Then explain my son. The silence that followed felt like standing on thin ice, waiting for the crack. General Adler's voice cut through from the doorway, carrying the kind of authority that didn't request entry. I think that's enough for today, gentlemen. Ms. Schneider. Reynolds stood, his posture defensive. General, with respect, this is an intelligence matter that requires... What it requires is you remembering that this child prevented an international assassination on German soil. Adler moved into the room like a weather system, his presence altering atmospheric pressure. He's not a suspect. He's not an asset to be cataloged. He's a 9-year-old boy who needs protection, not interrogation. Schneider's expression hardened. We have protocols, and I have jurisdiction. Adler's tone left no room for negotiation. This interview is concluded. 2 hours later, in a car with windows tinted to opacity, Patricia held Ethan against her side as Berlin's streets blurred past. The general sat across from them, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in clipped German that made Ethan's eyes widen slightly. Understanding everything, saying nothing. When Adler ended the call, his attention shifted to Ethan with something that looked like careful wonder. How many languages? Ethan's voice was barely audible. I don't know, I've never counted. Any language I hear for a little while, I just understand it. Spanish? Mandarin? Yes, sir. Arabic? Swahili? Ethan nodded, his eyes downcast. Patricia's hand tightened on her son's shoulder. The memory rose unbidden. Ethan at 4 years old, sitting in their Lincoln Park apartment, while she cleaned houses to keep them fed. Their neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, had been on the phone, speaking rapid Polish, crying. Ethan had tugged Patricia's sleeve. Mommy, the lady says her husband fell down and won't wake up. Patricia had dismissed it as childish misunderstanding until the ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. She'd started paying attention then. Started listening when Ethan repeated phrases from Korean grocery clerks, Russian cab drivers, Tagalog conversations at the bus stop. Started understanding that her son's brain processed linguistic patterns the way other children processed music or mathematics. Intuitively, instantaneously, inexplicably. And she'd started being afraid. General Adler. Patricia's voice emerged raw, stripped of pretense. I need to know what happens to him now. Because if the answer involves government facilities or research programs or anything that takes my son away from me, I'll disappear with him tonight. I don't care how powerful you are or how much protection you're offering. Adler's expression softened in a way that made him look suddenly older, more human. Ms. Doyle, I'm not here to take your son. I'm here to make sure no one else does. Why? The question came out as a whisper. Why would you protect us? You don't know us. Something moved behind the general's eyes. Grief, maybe, or recognition. Because I know what it costs when gifts like his are exploited instead of protected. And I won't let that happen again. The safe house apartment in Grunewald sat tucked behind embassy walls, guarded by personnel who moved with military precision. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen stocked with food they hadn't bought, windows that overlooked a garden dusted with February snow. Patricia stood in the doorway of the smaller bedroom, watching Ethan sleep beneath blankets that smelled of lavender detergent and temporary safety. His sketchpad lay open on the nightstand, the soldier drawing from this afternoon, abandoned mid-stroke when the world had shattered around them. She knelt beside the bed, brushing curls from his forehead with trembling fingers. The tears came silently, carrying months of exhaustion and fear and desperate hope that Berlin would be different, would be better, would be the fresh start they needed. You didn't choose this, baby, she whispered into the darkness. None of this is your fault. I'm so sorry the world needs you to be brave when you should just get to be 9. In the living room, General Adler stood alone, his dress uniform exchanged for civilian clothes that somehow made him look more vulnerable. His phone rested silent on the coffee table. His hands held a photograph he carried in places he wouldn't name. A woman with kind eyes and a translator's badge, smiling at a camera in a moment before everything ended. Her name had been Sarah. She'd spoken 7 languages fluently, understood 12 more conversationally. She'd died in a building collapse in Kandahar because someone mistranslated evacuate immediately as maintain positions. One word, one fatal linguistic failure. He'd carried that failure for 6 years like a stone in his chest. Now he looked toward the hallway where a child slept, a child whose gift was so profound it terrified his own mother, and Adler felt something shift. Not absolution, but purpose. Not redemption, but responsibility. No child should bear the cost of our failures, he murmured to the empty room, to the photograph, to the memory of a woman who'd understood the weight of words. He set the photo down gently and moved to the window, positioning himself where he could see the apartment's entrance, the garden perimeter, the street beyond, standing guard, keeping watch, protecting the gift he'd failed to protect once before. Outside, snow began to fall in silence, covering Berlin in a blanket of white that looked, for a moment, almost like forgiveness. Morning light filtered through gauze curtains, turning the Grunewald apartment golden. Ethan sat cross-legged on the living room carpet, arranging colored pencils by shade, while General Adler occupied the armchair with a newspaper and coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. 3 days had passed since the hotel, 3 days of secured perimeters and careful routines, and the strange domestic quietness that follows catastrophe. Say something in Mandarin, Ethan requested suddenly, looking up with the kind of casual curiosity that belonged to childhood, not international incidents. Adler lowered his paper, one eyebrow raised. My Mandarin is terrible. That's okay. I just want to hear how it sounds when you say it. The general considered this, then spoke slowly. Ni hen yongan, you are very brave. Ethan's face lit with comprehension. You said I'm brave. But your tones are wrong on the second word. It should go up, then down, like a question mark shape. Adler tried again, following the child's guidance, and Ethan nodded approvingly. Better. Now it actually means brave instead of, I think you said forever the first time. From the kitchen, Patricia paused mid-motion, coffee pot suspended over her mug, listening to her son teach a decorated general tonal pronunciation like it was the most natural thing in the world. The absurdity and tenderness of it made her throat tight. This was their fourth morning in the safe house. The apartment had transformed gradually from sterile government accommodation into something that almost resembled home. Ethan's drawings taped to the refrigerator, Patricia's work blazer draped over a chair she'd claimed as hers, Adler's presence no longer an intrusion but an anchor. He'd brought groceries that first evening, actual groceries, not military rations including the specific brand of cereal Ethan preferred, without being asked how he'd known. He'd fixed the temperamental heating unit on day 2, arriving with tools and contractor knowledge that seemed incongruous with his rank. On day 3, he'd stayed for dinner, sharing stories about growing up in rural Pennsylvania that had nothing to do with war or duty or the weight of command. Patricia's distrust had eroded incrementally, worn down by small kindnesses and the growing realization that Adler's protection came without conditions or ulterior motives. He simply meant what he said. No one would harm them while he drew breath. Now Ethan scrambled up from the carpet, retrieving his sketchpad with the urgency of inspiration. I want to show you something I've been drawing. He opened to a page that made Adler lean forward with genuine interest. The image showed simplified figures surrounded by waves of color. Sound waves, perhaps, or something more abstract. Hearts floated between the figures like bridges. Words in different scripts bordered the page. Arabic, Cyrillic, Chinese characters, Korean Hangul, all rendered with remarkable accuracy for a 9-year-old hand. This is how it feels, Ethan explained, pointing to the colored waves. When someone talks, I see the meaning like light coming through water. Different languages have different colors in my head. German is silver blue, Spanish is warm orange, Mandarin is green gold. Adler studied the drawing with the seriousness it deserved. Synesthesia. You experience language as multiple senses simultaneously. I guess. Ethan traced one of the hearts. But the colors don't matter as much as this part. The understanding connects people, even when they don't know they're connected. Patricia joined them, settling on the couch with her coffee, watching her son explain his interior world to someone who actually listened. Adler's attention never wavered, never dismissed, never reduced Ethan's experience to curiosity or commodity. My wife would have loved to meet you, Adler said quietly, something shifting in his expression, grief surfacing like a whale breaching dark water. Ethan looked up, intuitive enough to recognize the weight of that past tense. What happened to her? Patricia tensed, ready to redirect, but Adler raised a hand gently. It's all right. He set down his cold coffee, leaning back as if the story required physical bracing. Her name was Sarah. She was a translator, military contract work in conflict zones. She spoke 7 languages fluently, could get by in 12 more. Like me, Ethan whispered. Like you. But she'd studied for years, worked at it. Adler's voice carried admiration and pain in equal measure. We were stationed in Kandahar, Afghanistan. There was an incident. Insurgent activity near a civilian compound. Sarah was translating field communications between local forces and our command. Patricia watched his hands tighten on the chair's armrests, knuckles whitening. Someone made an error. One word in Arabic mistranslated in the chain of command. Evacuate immediately became maintain positions. The building collapsed before anyone understood the mistake. His eyes fixed on something beyond the apartment walls, beyond Berlin, beyond 6 years of carrying that weight. Sarah died because of one wrong word, one fatal linguistic failure. The silence that followed felt sacred, inviolable. Ethan moved closer, his small hand resting on Adler's knee with the unself-conscious compassion of children who haven't learned that grief is supposed to be private. "I'm sorry that happened." Adler looked down at the child's hand, something cracking in his carefully maintained composure. "I've spent my life since making sure no one ever dies for a translation again. I oversee linguistic accuracy protocols, train interpreters, advocate for technology that prevents the kind of mistake that took her." His gaze lifted to meet Ethan's. "And now I meet a child who understands every language instinctively, who saved lives because of that gift. And I think, maybe this is why. Maybe protecting you is the only thing I've done since Sarah that actually matters." Patricia felt tears spill over without permission. She understood suddenly why Adler had committed so absolutely to their safety. It wasn't duty or intrigue or even gratitude. It was redemption. It was the chance to protect the gift he'd failed to protect before. That evening, Adler stayed to help with dinner, moving through the kitchen with surprising competence. He made soup from scratch, chicken, vegetables, something his grandmother had taught him, while Patricia worked beside him chopping carrots with the domestic intimacy of people who'd somehow become family in less than a week. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly, watching him season the broth with instinctive precision. "I wanted to." He glanced at her, and something passed between them. Not romance exactly, but recognition. Two people who'd survived loss and built armor from necessity, now tentatively lowering their guards in the same small kitchen. "Thank you," Patricia whispered, the words encompassing more than soup. "For everything, for believing him, for protecting us, for being." "Here?" Adler finished gently. "Human," she corrected. His smile carried sadness and warmth. That's the hardest thing to remember how to be. After dinner, after dishes washed in comfortable silence, Patricia tucked Ethan into bed while Adler conducted his nightly security check. She pulled the blankets to her son's chin, brushing curls from his forehead. "Do you like General Adler?" Ethan asked, his voice drowsy. "I do, baby." "Why?" "He looks at you the way people look at things they thought they'd lost forever." Ethan's eyes were already closing. "I drew that once. The color is purple-blue, like twilight." Patricia kissed his forehead, her heart too full for response. In the living room, Adler stood before the security monitors mounted discreetly near the bookshelf, 4 screens showing different angles of the apartment's perimeter, the garden, the street approach. His routine check, performed every night before leaving. Then he froze. The feed from camera 3 flickered once, twice, then dissolved into static. Camera 1 followed, then 4. Within 10 seconds, all 4 screens showed nothing but digital snow. Adler's hand moved to his sidearm with muscle memory, his entire demeanor shifting from domestic ease to combat readiness in a heartbeat. He moved silently to the window, scanning the garden below where shadows pooled beneath bare trees. "Why are the cameras out?" he muttered, his voice carrying the controlled tension of someone whose instincts were screaming warnings he couldn't yet articulate. Patricia emerged from the hallway, reading his posture instantly. "What's wrong?" Adler's response was calm, final, terrifying. "Get Ethan. Move to the interior room. Now." Outside, beyond the snow-dusted garden and the embassy walls, something moved in the darkness, deliberate, professional, closing in. The darkness beyond the window held too many shapes. Adler stood motionless at the glass, his reflection ghost-like against the night, every combat instinct screaming that the camera failure wasn't technical malfunction. It was precision. Someone had cut their eyes deliberately, professionally. Someone who knew exactly where to cut. He pulled his phone, dialing his security liaison with controlled urgency. 3 rings. 4. Voicemail. He tried the backup number. Same result. The embassy duty officer. Nothing. Communications blackout coordinated with surveillance failure. This wasn't random. This was orchestration. Clinton? Patricia's voice carried the tremor of someone trying to stay calm for her child's sake. She stood in the hallway with Ethan pressed against her side, the boy's eyes wide and alert despite the late hour. Interior room. Now. Adler moved toward them with purpose, his hand resting on his sidearm. Bring nothing but yourselves. Move. Patricia didn't argue. She'd learned in 3 days to trust his instincts without question. They relocated to the windowless bathroom at the apartment's center, the only room with a reinforced door and no external exposure. Adler positioned them in the bathtub, the porcelain offering at least psychological protection. Stay here. Don't open this door unless you hear my voice saying your full names. Not similar voices. Mine. Do you understand? Patricia nodded, pulling Ethan tighter. What's happening? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. He handed her his backup phone. Emergency services on speed dial 1, embassy secure line on 2. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, you call both. The door locked from the inside with a mechanical click that felt like abandonment. Adler moved through the apartment with tactical efficiency, checking sightlines, securing entry points, his mind racing through the calculus of betrayal. The safe house location was classified. Only 6 people in his chain of command knew the address. The security system was military-grade, unhackable without sophisticated equipment and inside knowledge of the protocols, which meant the threat wasn't external. It was intimate. Someone he trusted had compromised them. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Stand down, General. Transfer the asset or lose everything. Asset. They were calling Ethan an asset now. The dehumanization made Adler's jaw clench with rage that burned cold and focused. He deleted the message and moved to his go-bag, pulling out the equipment he'd hoped wouldn't be necessary. Body armor, additional ammunition, the tactical radio that bypassed standard channels. In the bathroom, Patricia sat in the dark with her son, listening to the apartment's silence punctuated by Adler's purposeful movements beyond the door. Ethan had started trembling, not from cold, but from exhaustion and fear and the terrible burden of his gift. Then he began whispering. Patricia felt it before she understood it, her son's voice forming words in languages she'd never heard him speak. Russian, she thought. Then something else. Arabic, maybe. Languages cycling through his consciousness like radio stations bleeding into each other. Ethan? She cupped his face, trying to ground him. Baby, what's wrong? His eyes were open but unfocused, seeing something beyond the bathroom's walls. They're talking. So many of them. Planning. Who's talking? Where? Outside. In the garden. On radios. His voice took on a dreamy, disconnected quality that terrified her. Russian. They're speaking Russian and something else. Chechen, maybe. I've never heard Chechen before, but the patterns are similar to... Ethan, focus. What are they saying? His eyes suddenly cleared, locking onto hers with devastating clarity. They said they're coming tonight. After midnight. They have authorization to extract me by any means necessary. They said the general is expendable. Collateral damage. Patricia's blood turned to ice water. She hammered on the bathroom door. Clinton! Clinton! The door opened immediately, Adler filling the frame with controlled alarm. What happened? He heard them. Outside. Speaking Russian. Patricia's words tumbled over each other. Ethan heard them planning. They're coming for him tonight. They said you're expendable. Adler's expression hardened into something carved from stone. He crouched to Ethan's level. What exactly did they say? Every word you can remember. Ethan's voice emerged small but precise. The one in charge said, "Authorization confirmed from Berlin Station. Extract the polyglot asset at 0100 hours. Contain or eliminate the general if he interferes. Priority is the child, alive and undamaged." Then another voice said, "What about the mother?" And the first one said, "Collateral damage acceptable." The silence that followed felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Adler stood slowly, his tactical mind already processing defensive protocols, evacuation routes, acceptable losses. But his heart, the part Sarah had awakened and her death had frozen, made a different calculation entirely. He moved to the living room, pulling equipment from locations Patricia hadn't known existed. Body armor appeared from behind books. Additional weapons emerged from false-bottomed drawers. Communication equipment materialized like he'd been preparing for siege since day one. Because he had been. Patricia followed him, leaving Ethan in the bathroom's relative safety. "Clinton, we need to run. If your own people are compromised, they're not my people." His voice carried cold fury. "Whoever authorized this bypass chain of command. This is intelligence community overreach, BND or CIA or some interagency task force that thinks Ethan is a tool to be acquired. Then we disappear. Tonight. I've done it before. I can... No." He turned to face her, and what she saw in his eyes was absolute conviction. "You run now, you'll run forever. They'll never stop hunting a child with his capabilities. The only way forward is through." Through what? A firefight with trained operatives? Through proving that protecting Ethan is worth more than exploiting him. Adler began setting up motion sensors at entry points, his movements economical and practiced. "I have allies. Real ones. But I need time to reach them." Patricia watched him work. This man who'd entered their lives 5 days ago and somehow become their entire world. "Why risk your career for us? Your reputation? Your life?" Adler paused, his hands stilling on the equipment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 6 years' grief. "Because I lost one family to silence, to the failure of words and the cost of miscommunication. I won't lose another to fear, to people who see gifts as weapons and children as assets." He crossed to her, his presence somehow both fierce and gentle. "Sarah died because I wasn't there, because I trusted the wrong people with her safety. I won't make that mistake again." Patricia felt tears burning. "We're not your responsibility." "You're not my responsibility," he agreed quietly. "You're my choice." Before she could respond, Ethan's voice cut through from the bathroom, high, frightened, certain. "They're moving. I can hear them on the radios. They're coming from 3 directions. 2 minutes." Adler's demeanor shifted instantly to combat mode. He moved Patricia back toward the bathroom. "Get in the tub. Cover him with your body. Don't move no matter what you hear." "Clinton, I've survived worse than this." He handed her a compact pistol, showing her the safety with quick efficiency. "Last resort. Only if someone gets past me." The apartment lights died simultaneously. Every lamp, every ambient glow, plunging them into absolute darkness, broken only by emergency exit signs faint green. Then the alarms began wailing, shrill mechanical screaming that signaled perimeter breach. In the bathroom, pressed against his mother in the bathtub, Ethan whispered into the darkness with the terrible certainty of a child who understood things he shouldn't. "They're here." Outside, beyond the walls that suddenly felt paper-thin, shadows moved with military precision toward the apartment, where a general stood alone between trained killers and a 9-year-old boy whose only crime was hearing what others couldn't. The siege had begun. The first window shattered at 0058 hours. Adler was already moving, his body memory from 3 deployments taking over as glass exploded inward from the eastern bedroom. He fired twice toward the breach, controlled shots meant to suppress, not kill. Not yet. He still didn't know if these were rogue operatives or misguided allies following illegal orders. The return fire answered that question definitively. Bullets punched through drywall 6 inches from his head as he rolled behind the kitchen counter. Professional placement, military training. These weren't contractors or thugs. These were Tier 1 operators executing an extraction with lethal authorization. In the bathroom, Patricia pressed Ethan's face against her chest, her hand covering his ear as gunfire erupted like terrible thunder. The boy's entire body shook, but he didn't cry. Somewhere in his 9 years, he'd learned that silence was survival. "Mom," he whispered against her collarbone, his voice barely audible beneath the chaos. "There are 6 of them. 3 already inside. 3 more coming through the garden entrance. The leader keeps saying, 'Compress the perimeter, secure the asset, acceptable losses on secondaries.'" Patricia's breath caught. Her son was translating tactical communications in real time while men with guns hunted him. "Don't listen, baby. Don't. I can't stop listening. It just happens." His voice broke. "They're going to hurt Clinton. They said he's a proud fool, and they'll put him down if he doesn't surrender me in 90 seconds. Patricia looked at the pistol Adler had pressed into her hands, cold, heavy, impossibly foreign. She'd never fired a weapon in her life. Never imagined holding her child in a bathtub while calculating whether she could kill to protect him. Another window imploded. Western side now. They were flanking, compressing, exactly as Ethan had translated. The apartment was becoming a kill box. Adler's voice cut through the gunfire, projected with command authority. "Federal operator under diplomatic protection. You are violating international law and rules of engagement. Identify yourselves." The response came in accented English, professional and cold. "General Adler, you are harboring a strategic intelligence asset without proper authorization. Release the child and the mother. You will not be harmed." "The child has a name!" Adler fired again as a shadow moved past the shattered bedroom door. "And he's under my protection. You want him? You go through me." "That can be arranged." Flashbang. The explosion of light and sound hit like a physical blow. Even in the sealed bathroom, Patricia and Ethan felt the concussive wave. Ethan screamed, his sensitive hearing making the assault exponentially worse. Patricia wrapped herself around him, becoming a human shield against sensory overload. When her vision cleared, she heard new sounds. Hand-to-hand combat. Grunting. Impact. Adler had engaged someone in close quarters. Then his voice, strained but controlled. "Bathroom! Now. East window. Go." Patricia didn't hesitate. She grabbed Ethan, threw open the bathroom door, and ran toward the eastern bedroom where cold air poured through the shattered window. Adler appeared behind them, backing toward their position while facing 3 masked operatives who advanced with tactical precision. "Out the window. Fire escape. Don't stop running until you reach the embassy main gate." He pressed something into her hand, his military ID. "Show them this. Tell them code Sierra 7. They'll protect you." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." The lie was obvious, gentle. Patricia looked at him. This man who'd chosen them, protected them, given them something that felt dangerously close to family. "Clinton! Go!" He fired 3 rounds in rapid succession, forcing the operatives into cover. Patricia climbed through the window with Ethan, the winter air hitting like a slap. The fire escape was ice-slicked metal, treacherous in the darkness. She could see the garden below, the embassy walls beyond, salvation exactly 200 yards away. Behind her, Adler positioned himself in the window frame, a deliberate target drawing fire away from their escape route. Ethan twisted in his mother's arms, looking back at the general. "He's going to die. They have a sniper. Thermal scope. I heard them coordinate. Don't look back, baby. Just... The crack of a high-powered rifle split the night. Adler's body jerked, his left shoulder blooming red. He stumbled but didn't fall, returning fire toward a rooftop position Patricia couldn't see. His voice carried across the distance, weakening but absolute. "Run!" Patricia ran. She carried Ethan down the fire escape with strength born from pure maternal terror, her feet slipping on ice, her lungs burning. Behind them, gunfire continued, sporadic now, desperate. Adler buying them seconds with his own blood. They hit the ground running. The garden stretched before them like a frozen maze, sculptured hedges casting moon shadows that could hide anything. Patricia clutched the pistol in one hand, Ethan's wrist in the other, sprinting toward the distant embassy gate where lights blazed like a promised land. Ethan's voice came in gasps between footfalls. "Two. Following us. 30 meters back. They're saying, 'Take us alive. But weapons. Authorized.'" A voice called from the darkness behind them. English now, clear and commanding. "Mrs. Doyle, stop running! We're not going to hurt your son! We're protecting him!" Patricia didn't slow. She'd heard those words before in different contexts. Caseworkers promising Ethan would be better off in specialized programs, doctors suggesting residential facilities, well-meaning authorities who saw her son as a problem to be managed rather than a child to be loved. The embassy gate loomed closer. 50 yards. 40. Ethan screamed. Patricia turned to see a figure emerging from the hedge line. Tactical gear, raised weapon, moving with professional speed. She did something that surprised her completely. She raised Adler's pistol and fired. The shot went wide. She'd never aimed a gun in her life, but the figure dove for cover, buying them precious seconds. "Embassy security!" Patricia's voice cracked with desperation as they reached the gate. "Code Sierra 7! General Adler sent us! Please!" Floodlights erupted across the garden like artificial daylight. Armed embassy guards poured through the gate, weapons trained on the pursuing operatives who melted back into shadows with professional discipline. Hands grabbed Patricia and Ethan, pulling them through the gate into the protected zone. Someone wrapped a thermal blanket around them. Someone else was shouting into a radio. The world became fragments of sound and light and the overwhelming sensation of temporary safety. "The general!" Patricia gasped to whoever would listen. "He's still in the apartment. He's wounded. They're going to kill him. Please!" A senior officer with kind eyes and commander's insignia knelt before her. "Ma'am, we have QRF en route to his location. He'll be extracted within 3 minutes. Is he alive?" The officer's hesitation lasted half a second too long. "We don't have confirmation yet." Ethan pulled free from his mother's grasp, his face streaked with tears and something harder, resolve that didn't belong on 9-year-old features. He looked up at the officer with eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. "He has to be alive," Ethan said, his voice steady despite everything, "because he promised he wouldn't let them take me. And General Adler doesn't break promises." The officer's radio crackled. A voice Patricia didn't recognize reported through static. "Target building secured. 3 hostiles in custody. 1 wounded, friendly recovered. Medical en route." "Status of the wounded?" the officer demanded. The pause felt eternal. "Critical but stable. He's asking for the kid and the mother." Patricia's legs gave out. She sank to the frozen ground, pulling Ethan against her, sobbing with relief and delayed terror and something that felt uncomfortably like love for a man she'd known less than a week. Ethan whispered against her shoulder, translating the radio chatter only he could fully understand. "They're bringing him home, Mom. He's coming home." Above them, embassy personnel moved with coordinated efficiency. Security protocols activated, diplomatic communications channels blazed to life. Somewhere in Berlin, powerful people were about to answer very difficult questions about who authorized an assault on a protected general. But in that moment, in the circle of floodlights with her son pressed against her heart, Patricia Doyle allowed herself something she hadn't permitted in years. Hope that they might actually survive this. Hope that the man who'd chosen to protect them might live. Hope that morning would come and they'd still be together. The night air carried distant sirens and the sound of Ethan's quiet breathing and the whispered prayer Patricia hadn't spoken since her own mother died. Please, please let him be okay. The medical bay smelled of antiseptic and snow tracked in on military boots. Adler sat upright despite the field medic's protests, his left shoulder bandaged heavily, his jaw set against pain he refused to acknowledge. When Patricia and Ethan were cleared to enter, his entire body relaxed, the first genuine exhale since the gunfire stopped. Ethan ran to him, stopping just short of collision, his small hands hovering uncertainly near Adler's uninjured arm. "You got shot because of me." "I got shot protecting you," Adler corrected gently, his right hand settling on the boy's shoulder. "There's a difference." One I'd make again without hesitation. Patricia stood in the doorway, her composure finally cracking. Tears spilled over as she crossed to them, her hand finding Adler's face with trembling fingers. "You could have died." "But I didn't." His eyes held hers with startling intensity. "And neither did you." That's what matters. Dawn was breaking over Berlin, pale winter light turning the embassy windows gold. Outside, diplomatic vehicles arrived in synchronized procession. Investigators, military brass, intelligence officials whose questions would consume the next 72 hours. But inside this small medical room, the world contracted to 3 people who'd survived the night together. The embassy liaison appeared with documents and forced professional sympathy. "Mrs. Doyle, we're prepared to offer you and your son immediate relocation, new identities, financial support, complete protection package. You'd be safe." Patricia looked at the papers without touching them. "Safe where?" "Running from what? For how long?" "As long as necessary." "That's not an answer. That's a life sentence." She turned to Adler, searching his face for guidance she'd learned to trust. "What do you think?" Adler dismissed the liaison with a gesture, waiting until they were alone before speaking. His voice carried exhaustion and conviction in equal measure. "I think running means they win. It means Ethan spends his life hiding a gift that could change how the world communicates. It means you live in fear instead of freedom. And the alternative? Stay." The word hung between them, weighted with possibility. "Stay in Berlin. Let me help you build something real, legal residency, proper security, a life that doesn't require hiding." He looked at Ethan, then back to Patricia. "I have resources, connections, people who owe me favors. We can make this work." Patricia's laugh came out broken, disbelieving. "Why? Why would you do this for us?" Adler's response came slowly, each word chosen with care. "Because for 6 years I've performed duty without purpose, followed protocols without meaning. I've been a soldier executing orders in a war I no longer believed in." His hand found hers, his grip warm despite everything. "You both reminded me what duty truly means. Not obligation to institutions, but responsibility to people, to protecting what's fragile and precious and worth more than any mission brief." Ethan climbed carefully onto the medical bed, positioning himself between them with the possessive certainty of a child claiming his family. "Does this mean we're staying together?" Patricia and Adler exchanged glances over his head. 2 adults recognizing something neither had sought, but both desperately needed. Not romance exactly, not yet, but foundation. The beginning of something built from trauma and trust, and the strange alchemy that transforms strangers into family. Yes, Patricia whispered, her hand covering Adler's. "We're staying together." 2 months later. The Spree River reflected morning light like scattered diamonds, Berlin awakening to another spring day. Ethan walked between them along the riverside path, his right hand in Patricia's, his left in Adler's, the three of them moving in comfortable synchronization. Patricia had started work at the embassy's humanitarian liaison office, translating her event coordination skills into refugee advocacy. Adler had returned to duty with new purpose, implementing protocols that protected linguistic assets as people rather than tools. And Ethan attended the International School of Berlin, where his gift was nurtured rather than exploited, celebrated rather than feared. They'd become something the paperwork couldn't quite classify, not traditional family, but family nonetheless, built from crisis, forged in protection, sustained by choice. Ethan stopped suddenly, listening to something only he could hear, a street musician playing accordion nearby, singing in Turkish about homeland and belonging. The boy's face softened with comprehension, his lips moving silently as he translated meaning from melody. Then he looked up at the two adults flanking him, his voice emerging in German, that silver-blue language that had started everything. Speaking words meant only for them. "Jetzt sind wir sicher." Safe now. Patricia didn't understand the words, but she understood her son's expression. She looked at Adler, whose slight smile confirmed what she suspected. "What did he say?" Adler's hand tightened gently on Ethan's. "He said we're safe now." And in that moment, walking beside the river while Berlin woke around them, with winter finally releasing its grip and spring pushing through frozen ground, it felt true. The boy who heard what no one else could had saved lives by speaking. The general who'd lost everything to silence had found redemption in protection. The mother who'd run for years had finally stopped running. They weren't a traditional family. They were something rarer. Three people who'd found each other in catastrophe and chosen deliberately and absolutely to stay. Ethan squeezed both their hands, his gift no longer a burden but a bridge connecting them to a world that spoke in 1,000 languages but meant ultimately the same thing: love, safety home. The river flowed on, carrying the morning light downstream, indifferent and eternal, and three souls walked beside it, finally at peace. Thank you for staying hooked to Life in Stories. Please subscribe, share, like, and stick around as we bring you more intriguing and mind-blowing stories.